16. I'm going to start right here in verse number 1. We're going to talk about the end of the tribulation period. We're kind of wrapping up that period. We've talked about it in some detail. And so chapter 16, verse 1, I heard a great voice out of the temple saying to the 7 angels, "Go your ways, pour out the vials of wrath of God upon the earth." The first went and poured out his vial upon the earth, and there fell a noisome, grievous sore upon the men which had the mark of the beast, and upon them which worshipped his name. The second angel poured out his vial upon the sea, and it became as the blood of a dead man, and every soul died in the sea. The third angel poured out his vial upon the rivers and fountains of waters, and they became blood. I heard the angel of the waters say, "Thou art righteous, O Lord, which art, wast, and shalt be, because thou hast judged thus. For they shed the blood of saints and prophets, and thou hast given them blood to drink, for they are worthy." And I heard another out of the altar say, "Even so, Lord God Almighty, true and righteous are thy judgments." The fourth angel poured out his vial upon the sun. Power was given unto him to scorch men with fire. The men were scorched with great heat. They blasphemed the name of God, which hath power over these plagues, and they repented not to give him glory. The fifth angel poured out his vial upon the seat of the beast, and his kingdom was full of darkness, and they gnawed their tongues for pain. They blasphemed the God of heaven because of their pain, their sores, and repented not of their deeds. The sixth angel poured out his vial upon the great river Euphrates. The water thereof was dried up, that the way of the kings of the east might be prepared. So we're preparing for the battle of Armageddon. Verse 13, I saw 3 unclean spirits like frogs come out of the mouth of the dragon, out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. For they are the spirits of devils, working miracles, which go forth unto the kings of the earth and of the whole world, to gather them to the battle of the great day of God Almighty. Behold, I come as a thief. Blessed is he that watcheth and keepeth his garments, lest he walk naked and they see his shame. And he gathered them together into a place in the Hebrew tongue called Armageddon. The seventh angel poured out his vial in the air. There came a great voice out of the temple of heaven from the throne, saying, "It is done." There were voices, thunders, lightnings. There was a great earthquake, such as was not seen since men were upon the earth, so mighty an earthquake and so great. The great city was divided into 3 parts. The cities of the nations fell. The great Babylon came in remembrance before God to give unto her the cup of the wine of the fierceness of his wrath. And every island fled away, and the mountains were not found. There fell upon men a great hail out of heaven, every stone about the weight of a talent. Men blasphemed God because of the plague of the hail, for the plague thereof was exceeding great. So, excuse me, as we come to chapter 16, we see the vials, or the bowl judgments, but as we see here in chapter 16, referred to as the vials being poured out. This is the very end of the tribulation period. These are the things that are culminating in the very final act. What time frame does this cover? We don't know specifically, but most theologians believe this is within a few months. So we're right down to the end of the 7-year period, the last few months being wrapped up with these type of events being poured out as God's final wrath is poured out upon man before he returns, before he comes back. A couple things I wanted to point out before I get to my outline here. First of all, several times as I read through the entire chapter, it mentioned that no matter what happened, they continued to blaspheme God. They continued to blaspheme God. I mentioned this a couple weeks ago. I think we see it again in chapter 16. One of the things that we see is a parallel between the plagues of Egypt and the things that are happening here. And so while we saw a number of similarities, by the way, Desi's class this morning made the locusts. Did you see the locusts? They're a little snapping, they were something else. You missed the locusts. You missed a go. We'll try to put some pictures of that on Facebook. But the plagues, they're learning the plagues from Moses and Egypt and from the book of Exodus. But here in the Revelation, we see the very similar parallel of a number of things. But here's a parallel. God poured out plagues upon Egypt, and Pharaoh kept hardening his heart. God's pouring out these judgments, these vile judgments, bowl judgments upon mankind, upon the earth in the Great Tribulation, and they continue to blaspheme God. They continue to curse God. The only time, I probably have mentioned this before, the only time I saw my dad really confront a situation in public was he and I at an auto parts store when I'm a teenager, and the guy behind the counter of the auto parts store is cursing God. He's blaming God for everything that goes wrong. I hear your emergency alarms go off, I know. There's probably a great hail coming. We're reading about it. Here it comes, but I'm going to keep teaching. If you want to leave because of hail or something, knock yourself out. Don't knock yourself out. That sounds terrible. No, get in your car and drive home safely. My dad, the guy behind the counter, was talking to a customer of his, and he was blaming God for everything that had gone wrong over the weekend. Using GD this and over until finally, my dad and I were waiting our turns. My dad did not interrupt him, let him go. And then that guy finally left, and the guy turned to my dad. He's like, "Can I help you?" My dad said, "Yes. First of all, you can stop blaming my God for all of your car troubles." Just like that. The guy's like, "Okay." And I need this starter. So, doesn't that irk you? That's one of the things that just irks me, is when people use God's name so flippantly. It is so clearly defined about the fact of not using God's name in vain. And I think we find in the book of Revelation that they're going beyond that. They're blaspheming God. They're blaming God. They're cursing God. It's blasphemy before God as they're dealing with the brunt of his anger upon them. The other thing that I couldn't help but notice, and it's highlighted in my Bible, and that's the end of verse number 17. The end of verse number 17. When the seventh angel poured out his vial into the air, and then there came a great voice out of the temple of heaven from the throne, so we're defining who this is, that says, "It is done." Sounds very similar to what Jesus Christ said on the cross when he said, "It is finished." And when it was finished, he had paid the price for salvation. And the plan of redemption was complete because he had paid the price with his own shed blood on the cross of Calvary. It was done. It was finished. And now the acts of humanity and the judgments of God upon them here in this book of Revelation, that's told to us in the book of Revelation, are done, finished, complete. He's coming back. He's done what he said he was going to do. And the time of humanity, as we know it, as has been defined, is over. From now on, it'll be a whole new order. Christ on the throne of David in the great millennium. And we understand what God has in store for mankind and earth moving forward, but his judgment upon man, his judgment upon sin at this moment is done. It's finished. It's complete. And I think those are two very important things that should jump off the page to us in chapter 16. I'm going to run down through these. We read them. So let me just run down through them here real quick on my outline. The first one we see there is the sores upon mankind. We've seen that a few places. Again, we see that in Moses' plagues there in Egypt, as there are sores upon mankind and upon beast. Number two there, the sea turns to blood. Many theologians, and I'll tell you who I use as my go-to, is Dwight Pentecost and his book called Things to Come. I probably have referred to that in the past, but that's kind of my go-to book. And Pentecost believes that we're talking about the Mediterranean Sea, right there in the center of everything that's going on. We talked about the Antichrist and the countries that are coming, and Israel and Jerusalem and Battle of Armageddon. It's all culminating right there in where things started is where things are going to end. And so this always leads to the question, well, where's America in all this? I don't see it. I don't know what that means. None of us knows we don't see it. There was a time that I thought maybe America, had fallen, right? I've heard preachers say that. Maybe America was no longer a free country. Maybe America. Now I look at this and think it's very possible we have some wimpy, spineless president during this time who doesn't do anything. Unlike the president we have now, but I think there's a real possibility we might just have a president or a country who just takes a back seat, who wants to stay out of everything, who just hides. It's not the way we handle things now. No matter who the president is right now, America gets involved. We take the forefront on things. We lead things. We do things. Republican or Democrat, we've done that. But I think the time's going to come when America is going to back out of things and hide and tuck its tail and not do anything. I think that's maybe a best case scenario. The worst case scenario is something we probably don't even want to think about. But what's this area? It's probably the Mediterranean Sea that's being talked about in verse number 3. The second angel poured out his vial upon the sea, and it became the blood of a dead man. Every soul died in the sea. Probably the Mediterranean Sea, probably that very crucial part of the world, especially with the events that are culminating here. Verses 4 to 7 talk about the rivers and springs turning to blood as well. Verse number 4 talks about scorching heat from the sun. We had seen that earlier, as the grass is burnt, as what a third part of all the trees are burnt. We saw that earlier. And so now we see that again, scorching heat from the sun that is burning people, burning mankind. Then we see darkness on the kingdom, and it's very clear, I think, in verse 10 to 11. It's darkness specifically on the kingdom of the Antichrist. Verse 10, the fifth angel poured out his vial upon the seat of the beast, and his kingdom was full of darkness. So not necessarily worldwide, but something specific. It's as if, in our day and age, we spotlight things we want to highlight, right? We have spotlights on the stage, so that if the pastor or the choir or special music's on the platform, we have spotlights on them to spotlight who it is that we're trying to emphasize. This is as if God is putting a dark spot on the Antichrist. You would think that would be terrifying, right? And they continue to blaspheme God. But it's as if God's saying, it's because of you, and I'm coming for you. And his kingdom is dark, and his sea turns bloody. I mean, things get ugly in that part of the world at least, and much of this becomes worldwide. Number 6, the Euphrates River dries up, and it tells us it prepares the invasion from the east. And then we see God's final wrath upon the earth in the form of the battle of Armageddon. That's the end of chapter number 16. Let's go right to chapter 17, and we see Babylon, the false church. And then on the back there, I gave a little handout that I got years ago on the Battle of Armageddon. We'll get to that kind of as a wrap-up tonight here. But let's look at chapter 17 as we look at the false church. I'm going to read, I don't think I'm going to read all of chapter 17. Well, maybe. But let me read down through some of it, and then we'll talk about it. There came out of the 7 angels which had the 7 vials and talked with me, saying, Come hither. I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon the waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk from the wine of her fornication. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness. I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads, 10 horns. So that's similar to what the Antichrist had. The woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color, decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand, full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. And I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints and with the blood of martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. And the angel said unto me, Wherefore didst thou marvel? I will tell thee the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carried her, which hath the 7 heads and 10 horns. The beast that thou sawest was and is not, shall ascend out of the bottomless pit, go into perdition. They that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they beheld the beast that was and is not and yet is. Here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are the 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth, and there are 7 kings. 5 are fallen, 1 is, the other is not yet come. When he cometh, he must continue a short space. And the beast that was and is not, even he that is the 8th and is of the 7th, and goeth into perdition. The 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. These have one mind, and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. They shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them. He is the Lord of lords, King of kings. And they that are with him are called and chosen and faithful. And he saith unto me, The waters which thou sawest, where the whore sitteth, are people, multitudes, nations and tongues. The 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, shall make her desolate, naked, shall eat her flesh, burn her with fire. For God hath put in their hearts to fulfill his will, to agree, give their kingdom unto the beast, until the words of God shall be fulfilled. And the woman which thou sawest is the great city, which reigneth over the kings of the earth. So we're talking about the false church. This is the unbelieving, if you're on my outline there, the unbelieving yet professing church that enters the tribulation period. And so a church that professes to be right, yet is not believers. They are not believers. They are not followers of Jesus Christ. And they enter into the great tribulation. They enter in because they weren't raptured. And they weren't raptured because they weren't really the church of God, right? They were not believers in Jesus Christ. They were religious, but lost. They claim, number one, to be the bride. Yet the Bible refers to them in chapter 17 as a harlot. It's a worldwide, it's a universal system of religion mentioned in verses number 2 and number 5, worldwide. Number 3, we see they're very, very wealthy, and we see that in verse number 4, decked with gold, precious stones, pearls, golden cup. So wealth is evident. Verse number 6 tells us they martyr the true saints. Verse number 6, I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints, with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. So they martyr the true saints. But ultimately, the Antichrist who uses this religion will turn on the religion. That's what happens in verse number 16 and 17. They shall hate the whore. The 10 horns, so that's the 10 countries that are unified under the Antichrist. The 7 cities, that's clearly talking about Rome and the revived Roman Empire under the Antichrist. We talked about all that weeks ago. But the 10 horns, they turn and hate. They shall make her desolate. They'll eat her flesh, burn her with fire. God hath put in their heart to fulfill his will, and that's his destruction of this great religion. It is almost universally accepted that this false church is very likely the Catholic Church. And the Catholic Church seems to line up with a lot of this. In other words, the great wealth, a universally recognized church, one that believes it is true, but is clearly teaching false doctrine. It just is. It will go in under the guise of being religious, but ultimately the Antichrist will use it, probably strip it of its wealth and power, and destroy that church. There are some that, as time has changed here, saying maybe this is Islam, because we see the worldwide resurgence, growth of Islam. Islam doesn't seem to line up with some of this, especially with the wealth and things like that. Not as much. We'll give it time. History may define some of these things, but it does seem to be maybe the Catholic Church. Interesting, too, the martyrs, and that is we've seen the Catholic Church through history being notorious for martyring or killing those that they don't agree with. They're not the only ones that have done that, but they have done that and set that example. I don't know, this is just a side note, but I don't know. I thought about this a little bit when I watched Notre Dame burning. I wonder if God's just not setting a sign there, just not setting a picture there. Billions of dollars rolled in very quickly to rebuild that and to re-elevate that. There were so many different people that were emotionally tied to that and moved by that, especially in Europe, especially near the seat of where the Antichrist will rule and reign. I don't know that there's any tie in there, but it does make me wonder. It does make me sit there and look at it and ponder that just a little bit. Did you find it interesting? Did you happen to notice or see that in any of the things that the New York Times article about that said this was not only a, I'm sorry, the word slipped my mind, a tourist attraction. That's what they said. Not only a tourist attraction, but is also used as a place of worship. Thank you, New York Times, Thank you. Like they didn't realize the Catholic Church was actually, a church. False worship? Absolutely. Right? Wrong intentioned worship? Absolutely. But still a church. It was a church. It was not a tourist trap. But the New York Times doesn't know the difference, I guess. They have no idea. But I just think that there may be something there. I just wonder, all the people getting involved in rebuilding that, is that going to tie into future events? Maybe. We'll see. Hopefully we'll see from the other side of glory. We'll look down and wonder at those type of things. Look at your handout there real quick. The Battle of Armageddon kind of gave a who, what, when, where, why. I always love these questions. I'm serious. I learned these when I was in school. When I was in grammar class, now that was a long time ago, but we learned adverbs, and adverbs answered questions where, when, why, how, and to what extent. And so I like to answer those questions when I'm preaching or when I'm teaching. We need to answer those type of questions. This kind of does that. So I found it very helpful. I've had it for years. I got this from my dad's filing cabinet, and I don't know where he got it from. The Battle of Armageddon, who is it? Well, the nations of the world under the leadership of the Antichrist, deceived by Satan into believing that they can finally destroy Israel. They gather their armies together for this great battle. Jesus Christ suddenly returns to earth. This is the second coming. That's the second coming, right? The first coming was where? The first coming was Bethlehem, right? First coming was Bethlehem. When Jesus Christ came, born in darkness of night in a stable, people didn't see it coming, right? We're looking forward to the rapture, but he's only coming in the clouds. He's not coming back to earth. So the second coming is when he comes back to earth. First time, they thought they were looking for a redeemer, a king. They were looking for, remember, all through the Gospels, even his disciples, they were looking for someone to set up authority, to set up a kingdom. That's not what he came for. He came to die. He came to be a sacrifice. He came to serve. The next time he comes, he's coming to put down the armies of Satan. He's coming to restore order. He's coming to end the sin curse, and he's coming to rule and reign. It's what Israel's been looking forward to. It's what the Bible has been looking to and painting the picture towards. It's what's going to happen. So the second coming, when he comes back. The what? Second point there, what? It's the last great world war that will ever be fought. It's an attempt by Satan and those he controls to destroy Israel and corrupt God's plan. He continues to try to do that, right? Satan continues to try to do that. Somehow we can disrupt God's plan, but it doesn't happen. It is referred to as the great winepress of the wrath of God in Revelation 14. It's God's judgment of the nations, the clusters of the vine of the earth for their treatment of Israel. It's also a separation of the sheep and goats that Jesus told us about in Matthew 25. This judgment is part of the process of purifying the world to prepare for the millennial reign of Christ. So that judgment happens when he returns, before he begins his millennial reign. We have a time of judgment there as he separates the sheep from the goats. That's those that are alive on the earth at that time. It's not the judgment seat of Christ. It's not the great white throne judgment. It's a judgment on those that survived the tribulation period. Those that survive the tribulation period. Those that are alive when he comes back. When? This event marks the end of the 7-year tribulation. It occurs as part of the 7th bowl judgment. We just read about that in chapter 16. It's the last judgment event that will take place prior to Christ setting up his 1,000-year kingdom. In perspective, this occurs 7 years after the rapture of the church. So if the trumpet blows right now, the things we're talking about are 7 years in the future. Where? The Battle of Armageddon will originate in the Valley of Jezreel. It's in the northwest Israel, spread 175 miles through the Valley of Jehoshaphat to the southeast to Edom and Basra. We can read about that in Joel, Isaiah, Revelation 14, and we just read about it in Revelation chapter 16. And why? This great battle and the events surrounding it will be the fulfillment of Old Testament prophecies concerning God's promise to deliver Israel from their enemies and to restore them to that special covenant relationship that he has always planned for them. It will be a dramatic event that will ultimately lead to a mass repentance and national conversion of Israel when they recognize Jesus as the Messiah that they had previously rejected. We can see Zechariah's depiction in chapter 12 and 13. There's other references there to Armageddon as well. And so that's what we're looking forward to. Those are the events that we're leading up to. We talked this morning. I want to tie the whole day together. Started in Sunday school this morning. If you're in any of the, like the adult class in here, any of the AIG curriculum, talked about the fact that God made a covenant with Abraham. He told Abraham, he took him to a spot and said, look, north, east, south, and west. And all that you see will be yours. Brother Walker mentioned this morning, we had the, who was it that read that in this week?
It was the Israeli ambassador to the United Nations.
Israeli ambassador to the United Nations used that passage from the book of Genesis. He said, here's our title deed to the land, right here. That's what he used. Good, well done. But have they, and we talked about this, Brother Walker talked about this in our class, have they had all that land? No, they haven't had all of it. They had a lot under David and Solomon as David conquered and got more. Today they're pushed into a fraction of that, but they had more. Have they had it all? No. When will they? Right here. Right here. When Jesus restores the kingdom and sets up his throne, restores all that promise. Think about that. That promise that he made to one person, Abraham, and his descendants to come. But the promise that God verbally made to Abraham, a covenant that he made with Abraham, will be fulfilled at this point. That's when they will inhabit all the land that was promised to them. That's when Jesus Christ will rule and reign on the throne of David forever and ever. That's the covenant and promise he made to David. All of these things will be fulfilled that everybody's been looking forward to. The Word of God's been looking forward to these events. These are fulfilled at this very moment as Christ ushers in his kingdom. So we'll talk a little bit about the millennial kingdom as we kind of wrap all this up over the next couple weeks. Not next week.
Hi, this is Pastor Wes Gunther. We just want to take a moment to thank you so much for listening to the recording of my message today. At Cedar Hill Baptist Church, we would like to be of help and encouragement to you, and we would love to hear from you. If we could pray for you, if you have a prayer request that you'd like to share with us, if you'd like to give some feedback on the message that you heard today, we encourage you to send us an email and let us know how we can help you. Our email address is cedarhillbap, cedarhillbap@gmail.com. You can get more information about our ministry at our website, chbcdillsburg.org. Thank you.